Excellent. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Allison Daigle. I'm the director of the Autism Alliance, and I'm here this evening with my fantastic colleagues, Pam McKillop and Katie Cassavant. I would like to thank you all for joining us this evening, and I would like to give a very warm welcome to Megan Romanczyk, who is a practicing speech pathologist at the Boston Ability Center in Natick, Massachusetts. She graduated from Northeastern University with a master's in speech pathology and was awarded the Clinical Excellence Award for the Northeastern Master's Speech Language Pathology program. Congratulations, Megan, on that.
Thanks.
She is experienced in providing neurodiversity affirming therapy for children birth to 18 years old with receptive and expressive language disorders, Gestalt language processing, articulation, phonological disorders, selective mutism, stuttering, social pragmatic differences, and motor speech disorders. Her postgraduate trainings include DIR floor time, learn, play, thrive, strengths-based approach to autism, and natural language acquisition training through meaningful speech. Megan was recently awarded the Distinguished Early Career Professional Certificate through the American Speech and Language Hearing Association. Congratulations on that as well, Megan. It is such a pleasure and honor to have you with us this evening. Tonight is intended for families of children who use ACC to communicate, families who are considering using ACC, or families hoping to learn more about ACC to support individuals with communication challenges. The program is scheduled from 6:30 to 7:30, and Megan is very happy to take questions after her presentation. And with that being said, I hope that you all enjoy this evening. And now I turn it over to you, Megan.
Great. Thank you so much, Allison, and thank you for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. And view, slideshow. Perfect. Great. Can everyone see? Yep. Okay, perfect. So let's talk about AAC. Like Allison said, my name is Megan Romanczyk, and I'm a practicing speech language pathologist. I come from the Boston Ability Center. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a quick overview of what AAC is for anyone newer to the AAC journey, avenues for obtaining a device, how you go about the assessment and trial process for getting an AAC device, how you determine the device to choose, what vocabulary to use, how to customize, and then a bulk of the night we'll be talking about how can we support AAC users who are at the beginning, middle, or late stages of this journey. How can we continue to help them communicate? So quickly about the Boston Ability Center, that's where I work. It's a pediatric center with OT, speech therapy, and physical therapy. These are our facilities, and we offer lots of different services. So if anyone has questions about that, you can email me, but right into AAC. So what is AAC? It stands for Augmentative and Alternative Communication. So augmentative means you're supplementing spoken communication. This may be for someone who uses speech some of the time or most of the time, but maybe they can't be understood by others. Maybe sometimes they have word finding challenges, or maybe sometimes they become so emotionally dysregulated that they can't access their voice. And so we use AAC to supplement their communication. It may also be an alternative to spoken communication. That may be someone who has childhood apraxia speech and you really can't understand them in the early stages of their development. So maybe we're using AAC to entirely replace spoken communication as they journey to become more intelligible. Or maybe they have a disability where they may never be using their spoken communication super functionally, and so they're going to be using AAC long term. So why would you supplement spoken communication with AAC? Maybe their speech intelligibility is decreased or inconsistent. Decreased may be they have childhood apraxia speech or a phonological disorder or dysarthria. These may be diagnoses that you're familiar with. Or maybe it's inconsistent. That could be due to emotional regulation challenges. It could also be to a disability that causes your speech to wane as the day goes on or fluctuate throughout your life. You may have inconsistent access to spoken communication. So someone who has word finding challenges or formulation challenges, they've got so many beautiful words in their brain, but maybe they're having a hard time getting to them. And the device is a tool that can help them access. Dysregulation, like I said, I always use the example of when I'm hungry, I cannot speak. I need to eat a sandwich before anyone can talk to me. And so AAC can help with dysregulation. So someone who is in that state of fight or flight, maybe they need to be able to say, I need something on their AAC device before they can return to using their spoken communication. And also fluctuating vocal ability due to a medical condition. A very common example of this is just laryngitis. And some people have disabilities where maybe they can sometimes speak and sometimes not. And so that's an example of why you might use AAC. So why would
Kira,
you fully replace
gentle.
Why would you fully replace spoken communication with AAC? That might be you have an inability to functionally use spoken communication consistently, or maybe you have a gradual loss of spoken communication due to a progressive disability. ALS is a good example of that. So AAC is everywhere, and we use AAC all the time. If I wave to someone, that's AAC. I'm augmenting my spoken communication with a wave. My facial expressions, if I use signs, if I say, "Ooh, I want more of that," if I vocalize, these are all types of unaided AAC. Most of what we're talking about tonight, however, is aided AAC. So there's lots of examples of that too. So we have non-electric AAC. So that's if your child has ever communicated just using pictures, like picture communication exchange systems. There's also limited voice output devices. So that might be like single switch buttons or robust electronic communication systems. Those are high-tech devices. Those like our iPads or the dedicated devices, we'll get into that a little bit more. But if you say your child is using TouchChat or LAMP Words for Life, that's an example of a robust high-tech device. So who may benefit from AAC? Basically, AAC is a form of assistive technology with the aim of improving daily living and quality of life for individuals with communication disabilities. Any individual who cannot consistently and reliably communicate with spoken communication can benefit. AAC can be used in the short term and in the long term. It does not prevent spoken communication development. I'll say that part again. AAC does not prevent spoken communication development. So I've seen such wonderful success working with non-speaking individuals who maybe in the early stages of their development find that AAC really helps to help them develop communication intentions as they're learning to speak. Maybe one day they will use spoken communication, maybe not, but all the research points to AAC can only help with that language development because they see this pictorial and written representation of language in front of them. They're able to interact, develop social communication skills, develop their vocabularies. Maybe one day they'll gain access to their voice and maybe not, but it is really helpful for that development, particularly introducing AAC when individuals are very young. So why introduce AAC? I talked about this a little bit, but really it helps people be more independent, autonomous, and let me move this over, and gain increased decision-making in their communication. It can help improve relationships as they learn how to be able to use more communication intentions. So maybe it's an individual with limited ability to access their voice, and all of a sudden their AAC device allows them to say hi or to tell a joke or to ask a question that may have been difficult for them before. It also leads to improved understanding from communication partners. If it's an individual, for example, with childhood apraxia of speech, which I think we have someone in the audience who is a parent of someone with CAS, basically, if they have difficulty being understood, their speech is pretty difficult to understand, then the AAC device will help them to be more clear. Decreased communication breakdowns is another reason, and better communication with less familiar communication partners. AAC can be really helpful for safety reasons. So if someone is non-speaking, AAC can give a person the ability to share their name, their phone number, where they live, allergies, medical precautions. So it can be a really helpful tool in those sort of safety situations as well. So for those who are considering getting an AAC device, there's a few routes you can take. You can go through private pay, you can go through your school district, or you can go through insurance or Mass Health. So there are pros and cons to each option. So it's important to choose what works best for your family. So if your child is enrolled with an individualized education plan through their school, an IEP, an AAC device through their school. Some pros to this is there's no cost to the family, and the school team is very involved in AAC assessment and implementation. So those individuals in your child's life who may know your child really well are really involved in this process. Some cons is depending on your school district, you may find that you're a little bit less involved in the decision-making process. Schools may require that the device stay at school, which can be a real problem, as we learn that AAC device modeling all day, every day in different environments is so important to success with AAC. Some schools may also use a device first model, which means maybe everyone at the school uses LAMP words for life. And so your kid's going to get LAMP words for life, even if that's not necessarily the best fit for them, or touch chat or a different device. So those are some pros and cons to going through your school district. If you choose to go through insurance, often that this will be less expensive compared to private pay. So there's a possible reduced cost. There's increased vendor support for training, vendors being the individuals who provide the devices. And then usually there's a warranty and tech support. So say you were to buy a device through insurance and it gets thrown at the door and it breaks and shatters, often there's a warranty and you get that protected through your insurance. Some cons are it's a pretty lengthy process. There is an evaluation, a trial, a wait time to receive a dedicated device, and insurance may deny initial requests and require an appeal. So pros and cons to insurance as well. And then there's private pay. With private pay, there are also options that it's not necessarily out of pocket. There's wonderful grants available. And so if you decide to go through private pay, you have immediate access to an AAC application on mainstream hardware. So through an iPad or an Android tablet, and your family will be really involved in choosing what's the best fit for your kid in conjunction with like your SLP or other educators who may be helping out. The cons are without kind of grant or without grant funding, the family is responsible for the full cost of the AAC device, which can range from like $50 to $250 on an iPad. There may be reduced guidance or support if you're deciding to do it on your own. However, your local speech therapist or whoever you work with in your kids' care team can definitely help guide through the process. Okay, so what does that process look like regardless of which route you take? If you choose to go the private pay process, a formal AAC assessment is not required. However, it may be helpful to do a free device trial before purchasing to make sure it's a good fit. So if you already have, some dedicated device and assistive technology loaner programs in Massachusetts are helpful if you don't have an iPad or a tablet at home. So you can go through any of these websites, NewMotion, AbleNet, or MassMatch, and they will give you an iPad for free to trial some AAC devices. This typically, they don't have a really stringent limit on the amount of time you can check it out for, just depending on where you live. So you can try it out for several months and see if you like it before deciding how to go. If you already have an iPad or a tablet at home, or you're able to access one, you can do a free trial, which is usually about 30 days of different softwares. So there's Touch Chat, Speak for Yourself, ProLoco, Cough Drop, Avaz, TD Snap. You have the option to kind of try it out on the iPad. And I'll kind of go through in more detail what all of these are and what they mean. If you choose to go insurance, you're required to have an evaluation and a trial period. It's important to call your insurance before starting this process to determine your coverage, because it would stink to go through this entire process just to find out that your coverage actually isn't all that great for AAC. So you can call your insurance provider and ask this, what is my plan's coverage for durable medical equipment, DME? Augmentative communication falls under DME, durable medical equipment, and they'll be able to let you know what the copay would be. And then you may choose oh, that's actually excellent, and let's go through insurance because that's the easiest process for me. Or you may find out our insurance coverage is not that great, let's go through school, let's find other options. If you choose to do an insurance-funded assessment, there's a lot of different options in the state of Massachusetts, in the Boston area. Spalding, Boston Children's, ICCD, Easter Seals, and North Shore are all places that offer AAC assessment. And a trial, so the goal of the evaluation is to recommend a device, and then the next step is a trial to determine if the device is a good fit. So the trial is free, it's usually 30 to 60 days. Speech therapist is responsible for documenting the individual's progress with the device, and then the speech therapist will submit an evaluation and the results of the trial to insurance for device approval. If you choose to go through school, an evaluation is typically required. So a school-based assessment, if your child is already enrolled in a school, you can speak to your child's IEP team to request an AAC evaluation. Again, this is free, and it's legally required. If you request it, they have to give it to you. If not yet enrolled in school, you can contact the special education department of your district to request an IEP evaluation, including an AAC assessment. Any child is eligible. So if you homeschool your child, if your child is not enrolled in a public school, you can still call the public school of the district where you live, and you are eligible to get a free assessment for AAC. And again, just to reiterate, schools are required to complete the evaluation under the Individuals with Disability Education Act. If the school says that they don't have anyone who's able to complete the assessment, you can request an AAC or AT specialist who may be out of district. So again, it is a legal requirement and you have the right to advocate for that. Okay, great. Oops. Oh, and then trialing. So the school will provide trial equipment funded by the school or state. The device is purchased through school funding, and then progress is determined through IEP goals. So those are all of the different avenues you can use to determine what device might be best for your child. Okay, cool. So once you go through whichever process you choose, here's a little bit more information about what device may be a good fit and how to best choose the vocabulary. So first of all, there's a difference between the hardware and the software. The hardware is the physical tool. So a lot of times you'll see something like this as an AAC device. Like this is an iPad. There's also Android devices that you can download AAC apps on. So most softwares can be downloaded on an iPad or Android device. If you already own it or you can get it funded, it's kind of the easier and more accessible option. You can also get a dedicated AAC device through insurance. These are much more expensive if you were to get them out of pocket. However, sometimes insurance will cover them. So if you have insurance that has good coverage for durable medical equipment, this may be the route to go. What's nice about a dedicated AAC device is if you need aided access options. So if any families on the call have children who may have difficulties motorically accessing an iPad, so that means like kind of using their finger and pressing the individual buttons on their device, a dedicated device may have more options for if they access communication via eye gaze, via head motion. I'll talk about that a little bit more, but if that applies to anyone, I can chat a little bit more about dedicated device options. Great. So how do you consider what hardware to use? You want to think about physical abilities. So a dedicated device may be helpful if someone needs switch access or eye gaze, like depicted in this picture here. You might also want to think about vision. So which hardware can give kind of more like high contrast images. If, for example, your child has cortical visual impairment is one example of someone who may benefit from high contrast images. You want to consider motor planning skills. So for example, there is the option on devices to get something called a key guard, where basically it's like sort of a plastic grid that you plop on top. And so if your kid is someone who sort of your kid or your adult, sorry, I should be saying, I work with kids all day, so I'm always thinking about kids, but people of all ages are AAC users. So if your child or teen or adult is using an AAC device, and there's someone who maybe like puts their whole hand, you can have sort of this plastic grid on top that helps guide their finger to what they're trying to select. So that's another kind of hardware consideration. And then the tone. So if the person you're supporting with AAC is someone who has low tone or inconsistent tone, maybe for example, they have cerebral palsy, you may consider a dedicated device that can sort of like have a stand where it's easier for them to access, whether it's mounted to a wheelchair or kind of whatever physical support might be helpful. Great. Here are some examples of those aided access options. So you can see a picture of a wheelchair with a switch positioned close to where the person's head is. So if there's someone who cannot access with their finger, maybe they're using a switch to say like yes or no or navigate through an AAC device. The bottom left, actually, yeah, the bottom two pictures are good examples of key guards. So that's where it's sort of this piece of plastic. So if someone hits the whole device with their palm and then kind of taps with their finger, it can just be helpful. I've had individuals who have a tremor, so that can be helpful, where instead of them going back and forth between two buttons, it kind of helps guide their finger to the right button that they're trying to select. Wheelchair mounts, switches are options. So that's basically like a single button that helps you select through the device. The neuro node is really cool. This is for individuals who have very limited mobility, and even just like an electrical impulse of moving your finger a little bit can help them communicate, which is pretty neat. I'm not sure if that applies to anyone here, but I just love this stuff and I think it's real interesting. Okay. So the next thing is software. So we talked about hardware. So that's you're either getting like an iPad, an Android device, or a dedicated device, which looks the same, but it's a little bit more durable. The software is basically the application that has the vocabulary. So here are some examples of common softwares. I think in Massachusetts, I often see like, let's see, TD Snap, Touch Chat, and LAMP Words for Life are the ones that I see the most often. You might be familiar with some of those names, or maybe you use some of those softwares already at home. So considerations for picking out a software. One of the first considerations is motor plan. Basically, if you are an iPhone user and you were to pull out your phone and I said like go to the weather app, you probably know exactly what button to click, because without thinking about it, your body remembers exactly where that button is. And so for AAC users, we want to make sure that we're supporting like what's called automaticity. So if they want to say like, I'm hungry, they know exactly where their finger has to go to say hungry. They don't really have to think about it because basically like that's what we do automatically all day, right? I'm talking right now without really like thinking hard about each word that I say and where does that live in my brain. It's just automatic. And our goal eventually is for it to be automatic for our AAC users too. So when I say motor plan, I basically means if the word eat lives here, it always stays there. The word eat is always going to be in like the bottom right-hand corner, and it always lives there. So it becomes automatic for the AAC user. Grid size is another consideration. I always say if I'm picking out a grid size for an individual, I want the grid to be as large as possible, considering the vision and motor skills of the individual. So some of you may already use apps like Touch Chat or LAMP Words for Life, and you may notice that there's options to make like 4 buttons on a page, or maybe 10 buttons on a page, or 30 buttons on a page. My goal is to give an individual as much access to vocabulary as possible. And as possible means, can they see and can they reach each button? So I'm not considering their current language skills or their cognitive skills because AAC is sort of supposed to help develop those language skills. So we're not necessarily thinking about what do we think they can communicate now. We're giving them access to as big of a grid as possible, planning for the future. Some softwares let you customize more, so you might even be able to program your own voice or the AAC user's own voice. You might be able to include pictures. So if you go into the food page, you might have pictures of the AAC individuals' like favorite foods or favorite toys or favorite places to go. So it's really helpful if they're customizable. You might also consider when choosing a software extra support. So there's training modules, websites, lesson plans, accessibility features on some AAC software websites. I know TouchChat, Words for Life have a lot of extra supports that you can find online. And then diversity and representation. So the diversity of people represented in the icons. Can you, for example, change the skin tone of the photos of the people? Can you add, specific religious words and customs? Is it customizable in that way? Also considering language. So if you're a family that is multilingual, does the AAC device offer all languages that the AAC user speaks? We know from decades of research that if you're multilingual, exposing your child or anyone in your family to multiple languages is really a positive thing for language development. It doesn't hinder language development. So if you speak 2 languages at home, it's really helpful to get an AAC device that also has those 2 languages programmed into it. There's a list here where you can see basically all the AAC devices, what languages do they offer. And also considering code switching. So for example, if you have a device that has English and Spanish, how hard is it to toggle between English and Spanish? Because if we're using our voice and we're a multilingual person, we can quickly, without thinking about it, go from English to Spanish back to English. So on an AAC device, we want to be able to do the same thing. So TouchChat is a really good example of a device where there's just one button and you can hit Spanish, English, and you can go back and forth. So say the AAC user is talking to 2 people who speak 2 different languages, they can toggle back and forth. Based on the survey, these were the languages that I saw represented in the audience tonight. If there's more, I can chat a little bit more, but here are some examples of softwares that have multilingual language options. So Avaz seems to be the one that has the most options. We have Telugu, Urdu, Hindi, and Portuguese and Spanish. And then Portuguese and Spanish have a lot more options. You can do a cappella, cough drop, grid 3, Proloquo, TD Snap. All of these have multilingual language options. Great. We also want to consider making a system robust. Basically, choosing a system that's robust means the AAC user can say what they want to say, when they want to say it, to however they want to say it, whenever they want to say it. So basically, the language is unlimited. So an AAC system is robust if there's room for vocabulary growth. It supports all areas of language. There's access to an alphabet. So there's the potential that the individual is or may one day become literate and be able to type. It's organized in a way that makes sense and allows the AAC user to be a little bit more automatic. So they spend their time thinking of the words they want to say and not how to find them. There's options for pre-programmed language and customization, and there's electronic and non-electronic versions. So basically, this is those high-tech dedicated devices. So those apps you get on the iPad. If you think about it, I've seen a lot of kids in classroom who use PECs or maybe books with limited number of pictures. And those can be wonderful supports in the beginning, but basically the individual is limited to whatever you provide them with, and you have to print out and laminate more pictures if you want to give them more words. Whereas a dedicated system on an iPad, there's unlimited vocabulary growth. So the same device that would work for a 3-year-old would still work for a 23-year-old because the vocabulary continues to grow as they grow. And that's kind of what makes it robust. Great. A little bit more about why to choose robust if you have the option. So here's an example of TouchChat on a dedicated device. So the software is TouchChat. The hardware is a dedicated device. TouchChat has an unlimited vocabulary. You can customize the messages. There's a keyboard function so you can type, and it maintains the motor plan. So this word I, if you want to say I eat or I go out, I remember that quickly because I know that TouchChat always has the words in the same place. And so now for me, it's a little bit more automatic having worked with it a lot. And that's our goal for our AAC users as well. This is an example. I think this is a picture of PECs. So this person is saying I want Legos, I want ball, I want puzzle. It's just more limited. Often it's limited to requesting. You're unable to change word form. So you wouldn't say like, I wanted or I will want. And it's typically exclusively requesting. It can be really helpful. I know PECS is so frequently used like in school districts and in early therapy. It's just if given the option, I would recommend going with a more robust system. Okay, great. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about different device vocabulary. So this is LAMP Words for Life. Some of you may be familiar, and a little bit about it. It is a robust system. If you have LAMP Words for Life, you can say anything you want to say, because even if the word isn't there, you can program it in, or you can type it on the keyboard. There's 84 buttons, so it's a large grid size. That's great because you can more quickly get to the word that you're looking for rather than going through a bunch of different folders to get there. There's a consistent motor plan. So the word eat is always here, like it's always on, well, I guess you can't see my mouse, but anyway, the word eat is always kind of on the bottom, same spot. If a kid wants to say, I want to eat, they always know where that word eat is. It's English and Spanish are the vocabularies that are current available. And AAC Language Lab is basically a learning resource. So if you're someone who uses LAMP Words for Life, you can go and get free training modules. This is Touch Chat. It's also robust. It's customizable, just like LAMP Words for Life was. It maintains the motor plan, so the words always stay in the same spot. There's a few more languages: English, Spanish, French, Hebrew, Arabic, Canadian French. There's a whiteboard feature where people can write out, like draw with their finger what they want to say. Something else I'm going to talk a little bit about if any of your AAC users are Gestalt language processors. What I love about Touch Chat is you can upload video and audio and recorded speech. So if your AAC user is someone who responds really well to kind of like the original source audio, if there's someone who maybe if they're feeling upset, say if you feel so mad that you want to roar, and they kind of use that echolalia, you can program that exact audio into the device, which is really cool. This is TD Snap. So it's robust, it's customizable, it maintains the motor plan, lots and lots of languages with TD Snap, which is great, and they're kind of always expanding. TD Snap also has a lot of extra learning features for users. So you can use like visual schedules and timers. There's pre-programmed books. It's a really cool device. This is ProLoco to go. It's robust, customizable, maintains the motor plan, English, Spanish, Dutch, and French. And then there's online trainings available. This is Cough Drop. I've actually never used Cough Drop. I'm curious if anyone here has. It's robust, customizable, maintains the motor plan. It uses Google Translate to translate existing boards. So there's a lot of language options here too. And you can access it via login on any device, which I thought was kind of cool. So if you have it on your iPad, you can access it via phone. Okay, so let's put it all together and then we'll talk a little bit more deeply about like, what do you do once you have an AAC device? So let's say, for example, your child is named Alex. He's a 5-year-old boy with an ASD diagnosis, and he also has cerebral palsy. He just started kindergarten in the fall. He uses vocalizations, gestures, and head nodding and shaking to communicate. He has very limited mobility. He uses a wheelchair. He has difficulty with finger isolation. So that means it's going to be hard for him to select the icons. And his family speaks English. He and his family speak Spanish and English. His family and speech therapist decide to go through insurance so they can get a dedicated device that can be mounted to the wheelchair. And he can have 2 switches to navigate the device. They decided to use TD Snap because it's a motor-based program. He can quickly toggle between English and Spanish. He has access to quick fires, which is just a cool feature of TD Snap where you can be in the middle of typing out a message and then you can go and say like, wait, I have something to say. It's just kind of a neat feature. It's very easily customizable. And most importantly, Alex seemed to really like this one. The family explored a bunch of different device options through the trial process, and he really, really liked this one. He seemed to take to it really quickly. Great. Okay, so customizing the device. Basically, you're not alone. Once you get a device, sometimes families can say, where do I start? And the good news is you've got so many support systems. So if you work with a speech therapist, they 100% can help you out. If you're on Facebook, there's some really wonderful support groups. So if you just search Touch Chat, AAC on Facebook, you can find a group of tons of parents and AAC users who can help you with your questions like, oh gosh, screen froze, what do I do? Or I'm trying to figure out how to program and I can't figure it out. The software representative, so say you get Touch Chat, you can just search like, who is my local software representative in like Milton, Massachusetts for Touch Chat. And then you can give them a call and they can talk you through how to program it. And there's also free online training specific to the AAC software. So if you, for example, use Proloquo and you just search like Proloquo adding a new word on YouTube, you'll find tons of videos. Here's some examples of local device representatives. So TD Snap, her name's Jean Marie, she's lovely. And then for Touch Chat and Lamp Words for Life, there's Jennifer. She's also lovely, I've met both of them. So when programming a device, you get a device and you think where to start. Here are kind of my main principles. Start with a larger grid size when possible. So if you have the option to have 2 buttons on the screen or 4 buttons on the screen or 60 buttons on the screen, I say always start with a larger grid size because basically like kids start with 1 to 2 words and then they have 10 words and then they have hundreds and then thousands of words. And wouldn't it be frustrating if the kid has to kind of start to learn a new system every time their vocabulary grows? So if you start with the bigger grid size with lots of words, it will grow with the child and they'll continue to have access to all of this vocabulary. You can also be modeling that vocabulary as they're learning it. Avoid hiding icons. I always think it's better to have the icons available. So if, for example, you are working with your kid and you really want them to share with you when they have to go to the bathroom, when they have to eat, when they're feeling tired or when they're feeling hungry, I think it's great to model those things without hiding all of the other icons, because then you give your kid the ability to explore all of those different words on the device. Supporting communication in the present and planning for the future. That kind of goes into the grid size. So maybe right now your kid is really only using the words more and bathroom really inconsistently. But if you give them access to all of these words now, and you're modeling all of these words now, you're helping them have the opportunity to communicate that in the future. My video just disappeared. There it goes. Maintain the motor plan. So trying as much as possible when you're customizing the device to keep the same words in the same spot instead of moving them around all the time. And adding personalized vocabulary. So adding the kid's name, their favorite people. A lot of times kids' first words aren't the words we work on in speech therapy. So a lot of times in speech therapy, we're working on more, up, help, those really functional words. And those are great. But if you're assessing, like, if you're looking at what do kids often say first, they say mama, dada, baby. So they're talking about their family members. Maybe they say like ball or dog. They're talking about the things that they love to play with. So adding those personalized words, those things that your kid's going to really, your kid or your adult AAC user is really going to want to talk about. If the person that you're using AAC with is someone who is an analytic language processor, this means it's an individual who maybe is showing signs that they'll learn a single word, they start to put 2 words together, maybe they then put 3 words together. Here are some considerations. You want to avoid making changes to the home page, and you want to program single words on relevant pages. So that means kind of when you first download Touch Chat and you see all of these words like I want, need, help, more, keeping that consistent, but then adding personalizations under, for example, the family page, where you add kind of your name and the names of their siblings and family and friends. So for example, I work with someone who is using TD Snap with Motor Plan 66. Actually, I put in my own. So I decided to customize it with, my name is Megan. I work at the BUC. My favorite color is blue. My favorite food is jelly beans. So I added a little bit of personal information about myself. But on the first page, I didn't change it at all. So that there's still that quick access to those really functional words like, I need help, let's go. I put in jelly beans into the food folder because jelly beans are my favorite. I put Blue Hills Reservation into the places folder because that's my favorite place to go hiking. And then if you have an individual who's a Gestalt language processor, if you haven't heard that term before, that's basically individuals who communicate using echolalia, individuals who are really attuned to like chunks of language. If your child or adult doesn't yet use spoken communication, but you notice that they kind of imitate the rhythm of songs or words or language around them, they might be a Gestalt language processor. So then you would want to program Gestalts based on their communication intention. So for example, I work with a kid right now that whenever he's upset, he goes, "When you feel so mad that you want to roar," and it's a song from Daniel Tiger. So I recorded that original audio clip into his device so that whenever he's feeling frustrated, he can be able to share that with me. It's important to note that you won't delete the single words. So I didn't delete the word mad, because the goal is eventually he's able to say like, "I feel mad, I'm upset." Instead, I programmed that like within that folder so that as he progresses and kind of continues to use more flexible language, he's able to access that. Considering rhythm is really important. So we all know that AAC devices sometimes sounds like robots, like "I want to eat." So if you have the option to program recorded speech and say like, "Hi, my name's Alex," that might be a little bit more functional for someone who communicates using echolalia. So here's an example that I use with a client. So here's the home page. I didn't touch the home page. The home page looks exactly the same. But as you click and navigate into folders, this is what the feelings folder looks like on Lamp Words for Life. And this is what happened when I customized it. So I added the Daniel Tiger song, "If you feel so mad that you want to roar." And then I added some chunks of that language. So like so that he can then learn to mitigate and change those utterances. So now he can say, "When you feel so happy that you want to laugh." And he's been doing really well with kind of taking that original echolalia and then being able to communicate different feelings using that original chunk of language. He also, if he's really excited about something, will say, "This is the best bulldozer ever." I actually have no idea where that came from, but he'll use that kind of chunk of language, that script, to communicate. So I put it into his device. And then I added, "This is the best." And then we can kind of share whatever we're thinking about. So instead of "the best bulldozer ever," we can say like, "This is the best ice cream," or "This is the best swing," to talk about the immediate context. Also, if he feels hurt, like if he stubs his toe or something, he'll say, "I don't feel so good." And so I programmed that into the device using that exact intonation, that exact way of speaking, because that's kind of how he first communicated it to me. Great. Here's an example on Touch Chat. I have someone who, when he's hungry, he'll sing I think it was originally, maybe it was from Barney, like, "I like to eat apples and bananas." And so I programmed that song into his device so that he could share with me when he was feeling hungry. "If you're happy and you know it" is how he would communicate if he was happy. He would use the Daniel Tiger song to communicate if he was feeling mad. So I programmed those videos into his device. And then the next stage is programming mitigation. So maybe the first step is programming "If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands." And then the next part is I might program next to it just the phrase "if you're happy," and then they might be able to kind of modify that. At stage 3, you're going to be modeling single words. So that's kind of how the AAC device is originally set up. And then stage 4 is basically when individuals who are Gestalt language processors and communicate using echolalia will start using word combinations. And so then you're just modeling word combinations as you would with any AAC user. Okay, great. Now let's move into some strategies. So this is the acronym I like to use when talking about modeling AAC SMOREs. So the first is kind of using a slow, typical rate. So speak with slow and purposeful but natural voice. When modeling language, model using self-talk, parallel talk, commenting on the environment around you, respect and reflect. So provide words to what you believe the communication intent is. Repeating utterances throughout the day and across environments. Expand, add 1 to 2 words to the utterances that your individual is using. And then stop pause and provide time for the AAC user to communicate. So basically, what this might look like is, say you're chatting with your AAC user at lunch and you have their AAC device out with them and maybe they're not yet using it. And so you might say, oh, I like this. I like to eat. This is so good. And as you're kind of talking to them in whatever way you already communicate with the person who is using AAC, you're modeling those words. You say like, eat, good, and you're showing them where to find those words on their device as you're talking with them. You're talking about like, I really like this. Wow, that's so good. That's yummy. I want more. I want more of this bread. Ew, I don't like ketchup. Move it. And as you're talking through and kind of using different intentions, not just requesting, but also commenting on what's happening, talking about what you don't like, maybe making jokes, maybe greeting, using all of these different intentions of communication, you're modeling those single words on the device. You respect and reflect looks like maybe you give your kid a plate of peas and they push it away. And you take out the AAC device and you say, ew, don't like. So maybe your AAC user isn't yet using their voice, but you can give voice to what you think their intention is. Or maybe they're reaching for something and you take out the AAC device and you say, oh, I want that, more food. And so you're showing them how they can use the AAC device to communicate what it seems like they're trying to say. Repeat. So that means maybe every time grandma walks through the door, you take out the AAC device, you say, hi, grandma, and you just get that repetition. You continue modeling all day, every day. Expand. So say your AAC user is really picking up the device and they're starting to use it a little bit. Expand what they say. So if they say ball, you can on the device say want ball, more ball, get ball. So you're showing them different ways to use the device. Expand also looks like expanding the intention. There were a lot of questions about AAC users who only request. So they say like, ball, cookies, snack. So expand also looks like showing them different ways to use the device. So saying no, yucky, or hi, or bye. So showing them all the different words and the different ways they can communicate with other people using different communication intentions. And then stop is providing time for the AAC user to respond. I feel like we all want to support kids and teens and adults in communicating. And so we have a tendency to talk, which is wonderful in initial stages to start modeling. But it's really important also to give that time to respond. So to model and then wait and kind of see what happens. So all of those examples I just gave can kind of be summed up with aided language stimulation. So that basically means the communication partner uses the communication partner uses an AAC user's device to learn their language system. There should be no expectation for the AAC user to imitate or respond yet. And it's important to model making mistakes, correcting mishits, and thinking out loud the process of finding words and phrases. So I'll show a quick video of kind of what that looks like. Let me just make sure I have the sound. Oops. Escape. Great. So this is aided language communication. Great. So that's a great example of aided language simulation. I wanted to make a few comments about that. So that can feel really overwhelming. The video says it's all day, every day for months and months and months and years and years and years. And we all know that as parents, it's not your solitary job to do AAC modeling. There are so many other things you have to do in the day to be the wonderful parents you are in supporting your families. So I like to say aided language stimulation is the goal, but there's ways to make it easier. The first step is just see if you can take the device with you wherever you go. So that means kind of if you see your kid, you see the device. So trying to like help your kid or teen or adult learn to sort of take it with them where they go. So say you're sitting at the dinner table, you're not necessarily modeling every single word you say, because we know that you probably also maybe have other kids and you're trying to navigate a ton of things at mealtime. And so maybe you say, okay, like my goal for today is I want to model the word eat. So when I sit down at the table, I say, okay, John, it's time to eat. And I hit the button eat. And I'm wondering, oh, do you like what you're eating? And I hit eat again. And then at the end, it's like, okay, we're all done eating. And I hit eat a third time. So I modeled that word eat a few times. Maybe another example is you say, okay, my mission for the day is to really try to incorporate the device in transition. So every time we have to leave the house to go to school, to go to a doctor's appointment, I'm going to use the word go. So I say like, okay, it's time to go. And I hit the word go. And I say like, okay, time to leave the doctor's office. And I hit the word go again. So it can feel really overwhelming, but thinking about starting small and what are a few words and intentions of the communication that we can incorporate into our daily routines can make a big difference. I always use the example of for individuals who use spoken communication, usually babies don't use their first word until about a year, sometimes even later, sometimes 18 months, sometimes even closer to 2 years. And so when an AAC user gets a device, we want them to be seeing how the device is used for months before we can realistically expect them to be using it. Some people pick it up quicker, some people take longer to learn it, but our goal is to be showing them how to do it. And so that basically means we're holding their device or having it in front of them. And as we're talking, we say, okay, it's time to go to bed. We hit the word bed. Or we say, okay, like it's time to go to school. And we hit the word school. It takes time to learn it. And there's no such thing as being perfect at it. It's just taking it one word at a time and kind of learning it simultaneously with your child or kid or teen. Another really important thing is communication partner training. So if you are a parent of someone who uses AAC, you should not be alone in this journey. People will be there to support you if they know how to support you. And so that may be teachers, doctors, other caregivers, other family members. So communication partner training looks like educating teachers, classmates, friends, and family members on how to support AAC user. The more that AAC becomes a part of the child's daily routine, the faster they'll learn how to use it. So this is an example. I have a kid I work with who has childhood apraxia of speech. So it's really hard for her to communicate with her friends in class. So I reached out to, as her speech therapist, I reached out to her school and I said, hey, can I talk to the kids in her class about what AAC is and kind of train the teachers and train the kids in her class. And it was so successful. We did a little story time about what AAC is. I met with her teachers over Zoom to talk to them about what AAC is. And they all use it all day with her, and her progress with learning the system went so much faster when it wasn't just our 45-minute sessions. It was her classmates in the classroom, her teachers, her family modeling it. So the goal is kind of finding someone on your care team who can really advocate for that. So whether it be yourself kind of going to school and talking to the teachers about the AAC, or maybe you have a speech therapist, maybe you have a therapist or a doctor who can kind of do that for you, because we all know parents wear many, many hats, and finding someone who can really be an advocate for training other people on how to use AAC. Yeah. Great. Someone asked a really wonderful question about how do I model AAC that isn't just requesting? I like to think about kind of all the different ways in which we communicate with people throughout the day. Some of my favorite things to model for people is, first of all, saying no is a big one. A lot of times no is a kid's like one of their first words. So being able to reject things, being able to share their opinions. So say, wow, cool, uh-oh. Being able to comment, to say, I like that or don't like. Describing, so saying like, oh, it's soft, it's cold, it's hot. Being able to ask and answer questions, being able to initiate or terminate conversations, to say hi or bye or all done. Sometimes in devices, I like to pre-program like knock jokes. So it's a way to like socially like connect with friends, to tell a story. So you can program a whole thing like, oh, last week I went to the farm, it was so cool. How to participate in imaginative play. So being able to program words to say like, I have an idea, I'll be the tooth fairy and you be this. This is an example of a client I worked with, who gave permission to share. She was so excited that the tooth fairy was coming. And so she was communicating that on her AHC device. She said like, the tooth fairy is coming tonight. I know it's kind of hard to see her words, but she was sharing with me about the tooth fairy, and we were creating like a little like pillow pocket for her tooth to go in when the tooth fairy comes. And so it was really cool to see her ability to use AAC to communicate kind of this story about what happened to her during the day she lost a tooth and her plans for the future. Expressing feelings, so an AAC user being able to say, I'm mad, I'm sad, and gain attention. Great. Just a quick closing note for anyone who has to leave at 8:30 or at 7:30. I hope you can stay for the Q&A, but if not, I guess I'll just close with all forms of communication are valid. It's important to remember that we should be treating the devices as the individual's voice. We should have the device available at all times when possible. So taking away the device, turning the device off, take away valuable learning opportunities for this person to be able to use to learn the device. And as often as possible, it's vital to honor the communication intent instead of requiring an AAC user to use their device to communicate. Great, I'll close with that. And we should have plenty of time for questions.
Thank you so much. It's incredible. All right.
Great. If it works, I can start with checking out the chat,
Sure.
maybe, to kind of see what questions we have.
Sure.
Okay. Our SLP told us to get a dedicated AAC device because the kids will think of the device as their talker instead of something to watch Clifford or videos. An iPad is their talker. Oh, that's a really good question. So whether or not to use an iPad versus a dedicated device. So there are features on an iPad where you can make it so that you can only access the device. So depending on the kid, if you feel like that would be a good fit for who you're working with, like for your child or whoever, there are accessibility features you can set up. You can ask your speech therapist to help you with this if you're not sure. I actually don't know off the top of my head, so I'd also have to Google it. But basically, you can set it up so that the device is locked. The iPad is locked and will only show the AAC device when you unlock it, and won't necessarily be able to navigate to YouTube or all the other fun things. So you do have that option on the iPad or Android device as well. Because dedicated devices, it makes sense if you can get them funded through insurance, but if you can't, they're really, really expensive. So sometimes iPads are the more affordable options, and then there's workarounds. Great. Okay. How do you get a person who is non-speaking to answer yes/no questions more successfully if they don't comprehend everything? Should we be trying to get all the speech diagnoses that apply to our child? How do we go about getting those diagnoses? And what is the benefit of getting diagnosed? Okay, I'll try to answer the first part and then the second part. So answering yes/no questions is a little bit different depending on if you're an analytic language processor or a gestalt language processor. Analytic language processor basically means you go through this stage of development where first you babble, then you use single words, then you put two words together, then you start using phrases and sentences. So that may look like a kid whose first word is mama around age 1. And then maybe around age 2, they say, hi, mama. And then maybe by age 3, they're saying, mama, let's go. If you're a Gestalt language processor, that may be if your child or a teen or adult is someone who used echolalia or scripts. So maybe when they want to say, hi, mom, they might be using kind of a phrase they heard from TV to communicate that. If they're a Gestalt language processor, usually I say, answering yes, no questions isn't my first priority. My first priority is usually helping that individual work through how to use more flexible language and kind of work towards that comprehension. Because usually what happens is if you say to a Gestalt language processor, do you want to go to the park? Yes or no? They'll say yes or no. Or they'll just say no, just the last part, or they'll say the whole thing. Do you want to go to the park? They're not necessarily understanding that you're asking a question. So what I say, if you want to present a yes or no choice to someone who communicates using echolalia, I usually say it in the declarative form. So instead of saying the question, do you want to go to the park? Yes or no? I say, let's go to the park. Let's stay home. So I'm giving them the whole chunk of language. And so then they can say, oh, let's go to the park, or oh, let's go home. So they don't have to comprehend that I'm asking a question. Instead, I'm giving them language choices. Let's see, should we be trying to get the speech diagnoses that apply to our child? How do we go about getting those diagnoses? And what is the benefit of getting diagnosed? Okay. To get a diagnosis, you need an assessment. So I guess if you're referring to a speech diagnosis, so that might be a phonological disorder, childhood apraxia of speech, a language delay, that's something that a speech therapist diagnoses. If you're referring to a more global developmental, maybe like, for example, autism, ADHD, a neuropsychologist will diagnose that. The benefit of getting diagnosed is basically getting coverage for services is kind of the first thing. So if you get diagnosed as ADHD, autistic, having childhood apraxia of speech, however you go about getting insurance, getting coverage for services, whether that be like through insurance or Mass Health, you will be like eligible for speech therapy, occupational therapy, whatever may help address kind of your goals for your child. The benefits of, that's the benefits of getting diagnosed. And it's a personal decision. Some people choose to not get a formal diagnosis and they have their own ways of pursuing those services. But my personal and professional opinion, I guess, is that diagnosis typically just makes your lives easier in terms of accessing services. Allison, were you going to jump in there?
Well, I think the question too might be more like, so they have the diagnosis of autism, right? But there may be another diagnosis within that's related to specifically to their language. I think that might be what she's asking, which I think you answered in your first part, seeing a speech pathologist, having them assess the language, and is there a more, more specific diagnosis within that?
Yeah, totally. Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Oh my gosh.
That's okay. That's what I think she was asking. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah. So for example, someone who, like I toggle between person first and identity first language. So I'll use identity first. So I'll say autistic person. So if an autistic person, may also have, like, you may have a hard time understanding them. Maybe they also have childhood apraxia of speech. And so like a speech therapist would be able to help you.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay, perfect.
That's what she's asking, which you said yes, because she wanted to know if there was a benefit to getting that diagnosed.
Yes, exactly. So the benefit to getting that diagnosed would be kind of like basically eligibility for services and a better understanding of how to help. So yeah, exactly. So if something is just language, we may expect that this person, like the more we use AAC, they'll start talking and they'll start talking really fluently. If there's a speech disorder, which means like the way our mouth makes the words, so being able to say the words physically clearly, then a speech therapist would simultaneously work on being able to physically make those words in conjunction with supporting language development. hopefully that helps.
And what you spoke about tonight, which is to her question, yes or no, right? Where
Yeah.
you just like beautifully, exquisitely shared the Gestalt language processor and how you would present that. That is beautiful. And I'm sure there's more strategies just within that small little part that could be shared or could be worked on and supported with families. Is that true?
Totally, yeah. So for Gestalt language processors, basically, would you like me to speak about that for a few
I
minutes?
just think it's beautiful what you
Yeah.
said, and I don't know if other people are interested, but I know that's something that I've always heard. I've known it. I literally have known it for 20 years, but you just said it tonight in a way that I'd never heard. So yes, I'd love for you to share more of
Oh,
that.
good. So basically, Gestalt language processing, it's a natural way of processing language that many, like whether you say autistic or person with autism, that's how many of those folks will develop language. So they start with kind of a chunk of language or echolalia, and then eventually work towards being able to use language in the way that like maybe you and I would expect. So being able to kind of like take an idea in their head and formulate from scratch rather than from an original chunk of language. So a speech therapist would originally figure out kind of what scripts is this individual using and for what reasons. So if something seems really out of context, we might figure out like, oh, they say that script from Bluey whenever they're worried about something. And then so eventually we kind of have this whole like dictionary of like, here's a script and here's what it means.
Yes.
And yeah, and so then we will then work to figure out like, okay, are there missing pieces? Like, are they really great at letting us know if they're upset or frustrated, or if they're hungry or they need to go to the bathroom, but they can't yet let us know if they need help. And so then we work to like provide language models to support new ways of communicating. Then from there, we help with breaking down that language. So I gave some examples of that, but I had I just love the example of like Daniel Tiger, if you feel so mad that you want to roar. We then took that chunk of language and we broke it down to say like, if you feel so mad that you want to yell, and then we both yelled, and then we like worked on like comprehending kind of the individual components of that language by mixing it up and changing it until we kind of started to understand the individual components of that language. I could talk about that for a whole hour, and I'll send you the link. I'm going to present on that in a month, I think. So
All right. Well, we
yeah.
will be there for sure. That is
Totally.
incredible.
Yeah,
That
definitely.
is great.
So yeah.
Okay. And then do you work with children older, just older kids or young adults in your center over the age of 21? That's a question.
Oh yeah, good question. Primarily we're birth to 21, like kind of following the school district. Any questions that I'm not able to answer today, Allison, you can feel free to give them my contact information, and then
Okay.
I can help set you up with, like, because I know a lot of other speech therapists who work in the area. So if I can't necessarily answer your question, I can find someone who can.
Okay. Excellent. I'll get that to Lisa. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
awesome. Great. How old are your kids? I have 5-year-old. Okay. Oh, that's not for me. If the person has difficulty scanning, wouldn't it be easier to hide some words? Good question. So, I feel like with everything, it should always be person specific. So all of the information I presented tonight is kind of like gold standards, rule of thumb, with the knowledge that you've got to do what works best and what you found has worked best. In terms of if an individual has difficulty with scanning, like I'd probably try to figure out like, is that a visual challenge? Because then you could change things about the image. So you could make it high contrast. So in the app, you could go and put like a black border, you could make it a yellow background. So if it's a difficulty like distinguishing the images, there may be like visual accommodations you could give. You could also change the grid size. So if 86 is really hard for the individual to see, you could go down a size and do 60 images or 50 images if that's going to help the individual access better. The reason why I usually say don't hide words is because like, what if that's what the person wants to say? You know, that you have this word that you don't think is what they want to say and you hide it. Then, you know, in that moment, they may not be able to access it. And so I think that's usually the advice I give. However, you know your child best in it. And if you find that that is something that has been really successful, I'd say definitely go for it. Okay. Does BAC, accept new patients for speech therapy. Yeah. And we are open for appointments on Saturdays. So yeah. The assistive communication device is not a toy. Do you think it's important to see that it's only a talker? Yeah, I like definitely tell kids, families, peers, like, you know, this is their voice. It's like, and kind of exactly that, like, it's not a toy, it's their voice. I will say sometimes having access to other apps actually is helpful. In the case of Gestalt language processors, for example, sometimes programming like YouTube clips can actually be really helpful if that is the source of their original Gestalt. So for an individual who communicates using echolalia, it actually might be helpful sometimes to have access to YouTube, but that's kind of a specific example. If you find that having different apps and things is just not working, then yeah, I would say you can set up controls so that it's just the dedicated application. Great. Okay. Some other questions that came up, like how to teach the device. I think I went over that a little bit, but basically the best way to teach the device is to show the device. So throughout the day, finding opportunities to select the icons as you're talking. Some people ask what does that look like? Because that seems so awkward. And I say, like, basically speak as you would and pick one word at a time. So if you get the device and you say, like, oh, okay, here's where the word go is. And so, like, if the word go is right here, I say, okay, it's time to go, let's go. And so you're kind of speaking as you normally would, but selecting and showing the icons simultaneously. With the knowledge that you're not going to open up the device and know where every single word is instantaneously. So it's a learning process for the parents too, and for the speech therapist. Every time I get a new device, I'm like, whoa, that's a lot. And so sometimes I give people this advice. I don't know if anyone has ever taken this advice, but I think it's a fun activity. Whether you live with a partner or a grandparent or another child, you can like play games with it. So basically you can ask each other questions, like maybe after the kids go to bed, you say like, hey, how old are you? And they, like, you with someone else, like, play games with the device and basically try to explore and learn the vocabulary. I take interns sometimes and I'll have them do that. So I'll ask them trivia questions and I'll like score them on how quickly they found us. I'll be, oh, what's your favorite food? And I'll be like, wow, it took you 5 minutes to say pizza. And like, you know, so sometimes, and then they can learn, like, the more they explore it, the faster they get with it. Okay. So how to model on the AAC device without being overwhelming. I think that goes into communicating naturally. So instead of saying like, okay, like, and you're like, okay, my goal for today is I'm going to say the word more 5,000 times. And I'm just going to say more all day. Instead, thinking about how do you naturally communicate with the individual, and finding ways to incorporate words on the device as you're talking. So like, oh, good morning. And you find the word morning. Like, it's so nice to see you today. Like, time to get up. And you find the word up. So I always say, like, therapy or learning a new skill is about teaching, not testing. So it's not like you're holding the device in front of them and you say, okay, are you ready to go? Find the word go, because that might feel more like a task and more like a test. Instead, we're saying like, okay, it's time to go. And you find the word. So you're teaching them how to find it, not testing them on how to find it. And that's usually the best advice for how to not make it overwhelming. How to help an individual who rejects AAC. It makes sense that if you introduce something to someone and it feels like a task and it feels like a chore, they might reject it initially. And oftentimes that's kind of how it's presented. We're like, okay, here's this thing and it's going to help you talk in here. And so what can be really helpful is to find those ways to playfully incorporate it. So a lot of times when I first get an AAC device with a kid, I'll find really silly words first. So I'll say, like, we'll play a game and I'll say, ew, yucky, no, that's gross. And like, whatever the personality of the AAC user is, but a lot of times the kids that I work with find that really fun to kind of be really playful and silly with the device, kind of using those very like silly kid words. And then sort of establishing that positive relationship with the device, modeling without expectation. So instead of testing the kid on how to use it, kind of showing them. And then the communication partner training is so big. So like finding opportunities where, like, if you work with a speech therapist, maybe they can go into the classroom and talk to kids in the class about how to use AAC. So it feels less like, oh, this is this thing that only I have to use, and it kind of others me. Instead, the kids will become more accepting and sort of be more interactive with the child. So an example of that is when I went to do that training for the preschoolers of the student that I work with. I don't know if you've ever done the activity where you take a pumpkin and you feel the guts and it's all squishy, and a lot of kids really like that sensory experience. Other kids hate that sensory experience, but this was a kid who happened to really like it. And so I went around the classroom and I had printed out some of the words from her device, and kids got to tell me like, oh, what do you think it feels like? And no one was allowed to use their voice. Everyone had to show me like the pictures of like yucky, slimy, icky, gross. And so they started to learn how this girl used the device and how powerful it could be. And from there, it was really great to see like her starting to use it more, because she was like, oh, okay, like everyone can communicate this way and everyone understands. Yeah, it was really cool. And
That
so
is awesome. I love that story. That is
it
so
was fun.
cool.
Yeah, it was really neat. So, I mean, I'm hoping to do more of that kind of stuff. So let me know.
Hearing that, I think that is so wonderful.
It was really cool. It was very sweet. I mean, I love doing that kind of stuff. So it was fun. And not to say it's not always a quick fix. Like I have AAC users who continue, like I'll hand it to them and they'll throw it, which is why I have this handy dandy protective case on it. But
yeah, those are
it's not always that it's just this magic trick that people instantly learn how to use it really effectively. Sometimes it does take time and troubleshooting. If you try those two things, so kind of modeling in really playful ways, modeling without expectation, talking to the family. If you have more questions, feel free to email me about those. Or if you're like, Megan, I've tried all of those and it doesn't work, I'm happy to talk to and sort of brainstorm, because I think it takes a lot of creativity if when things aren't working. But I've seen success with different strategies before. Someone asked a question about the balance of programming phrases and scripts or single words on the device. And I think it depends on like if your child is a gestalt language processor and would benefit from having those scripts and phrases programmed into the device. My advice is program them, but don't delete the single words. I think I shared that earlier, but basically my advice is prepare for today and plan for the future. So if today your child is communicating using scripts, you want to be able to have access to those scripts on the device. Maybe a year from now, they're starting to use more flexible language. So maybe originally, my favorite gestalt language processing stories, I had this kid who would say it's too spicy to mean no, because the first time he learned the concept of no was when he was eating Indian food and it was really spicy. And so he would say, it's too spicy, which was so sweet. So I had my first day with him and he kept repeating, it's too spicy, because he didn't like the game we were playing. So let's say he was an AAC user with inconsistent access to his device. I would have eventually learned that it's too spicy means no, I don't want it. So I would have gone into the full, like wherever that word no is stored on his device, maybe there's a folder that kind of has just general like dissent, like don't like, no, stop. I would put it's so spicy, that whole chunk of language in the device, but then the word no would still be there. So that eventually as his language progresses, kind of like he has access to that script, but then he also has access to all the words that he might be able to progress towards. Yeah, great.
very cool.
And then supporting EI therapists. I'm curious if that question was asked from a therapist themselves or from a parent who's working with EI therapists, but basically my biggest advice is it's never too young to start with AAC, and it's never too young to start with robust communication. So a lot of times early intervention therapists will kind of start with pictures and then move to switches and then move to robust devices. And my advice is if there's the ability to access through insurance, grants, the IFSP, which is kind of the IEP version for birth to 3 population, the individualized family service plan. If there's a way to access a device, and you anticipate that this individual will have AAC needs, I say kind of go with a more robust system from the start, because the more years of exposure someone has to a system, the better they'll learn it versus learning a new system every time they switch to a new therapist, or a new stage of life. Okay, I think I covered everything from the survey that was sent out earlier. Yes, okay, from Elizabeth. Okay, perfect. That's a direct message. Great, cool. We have a few more minutes. If anyone has any other questions, you can pop them in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
All right. Well, thank you all very, very much. It was wonderful to have you. Thanks so much, Megan. This was just really, really incredible, and really happy to have you. So thanks, everybody, and have a good night. And we'll see you at the next guest speaker.